My name's John Adair, and I'm from Austin, and I'm in Dallas because my wife is running statewide, but I'm here just because I love Progress Texas. Progress Texas delivers information that you don't get from traditional news sources. You know, they're delivering consistent messaging that's progressive, but not because it's biased, but because reality is progressive. Really, I just wish that we could return to a time when there's a common belief that there's an objective reality, that people would believe in science and all the things that got us to the place where we are, instead of, for example, having the return of diseases that we eliminated years ago.
Thank you, John. John's wife is the lovely and talented Holly Taylor, who is indeed a statewide candidate. She's running for the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. It's Wednesday, April 15th, 2026, Tax Day. And this is the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch, rapid response on the breaking news stories Texas progressives need to know. I'm Chris Mosier. Progress Texas amplifies progressive values, leaders, and actions. Through our no paywall podcasts and digital media, we make Texas politics easy to understand and to participate in. Lies in Texas are well funded by the far right, but your support for fact-based reporting hands the mic to millions of Texans. Our thanks to Eric Johnson, Jacqueline Stewart, and Leslie O'Laughlin for their ongoing sustaining support. We appreciate it. The stark contrasts in the visions and plans for Texas from other key figures in the ongoing election cycle pop out into the forefront this morning. We start with Democratic Senate nominee James Talarico here and his plan to compel the billionaires of America to cough up their fair share, detailed by Stephanie Coython at the San Antonio Current. Talarico says he aims to close the carried interest loophole, which allows private equity and hedge fund managers to classify a portion of their investment profits as capital gains, which enables them to pay a significantly lower tax rate on those gains than if the earnings were taxed as ordinary income, and to abolish the generous write-offs that ultra-wealthy Americans enjoy on luxury purchases like private jets and yachts, which current tax code allows them to classify as second homes or business assets, reducing tax liability. Talarico says he believes the ultra-rich have not been carrying their weight when it comes to supporting the public infrastructure and schools that they and their families used to build their wealth to begin with, reserving specific criticism for recent federal tax breaks for the wealthy under Donald Trump, and specific Texas oil billionaires Tim Dunn and Ferris Wilks, who Talarico rightly sees as having bought our state's top Republican leadership, including and especially Attorney General Ken Paxton, long a financial beneficiary of those West Texas oil billionaires, who's as likely as not to be Talarico's opponent after the May 26 runoff, which is now 41 days away. From there, let's switch into the rose-colored glasses of Governor Greg Abbott, who's also been talking about his vision for the future lately. Earl Stoudemeyer and Andrea Cardin at KENS-TV in San Antonio say Abbott has introduced what he calls a taxpayer empowerment plan to lower property taxes, proposing 5 major reforms for the next legislative session, including a new 2/3 voter approval requirement for local tax increases, a cap on appraisal growth at 3%, and a transition to 5-year appraisal cycles, replacing the current annual cycle. Lower property taxes, of course, are going to be seen as an attractive idea to any homeowner, but Abbott's plan is drawing significant fire for its irresponsibility regarding public funding, particularly its provision that would entirely eliminate school property taxes. Abbott's opponent for governor, Democratic nominee and state rep Gina Hinojosa of Austin, points out the obvious that this property tax move would dangerously drain essential funding from public schools, that it would primarily benefit private entities and wealthier Texans, and that it sacrifices the long-term stability of the Texas education system in exchange for short-term tax relief. Abbott's planning to bring out the playbook he used to force through private school vouchers, in particular threatening political consequences for any Republican lawmaker who might consider standing with their local school districts to oppose his tax plan. If he's reelected in November, we can count on yet another nail to be hammered into the coffin of Texas public schools in the 2027 session. To compare and contrast here, James Talarico wants Texans blessed with wealth to give more to support opportunities for all of us, while Greg Abbott wants to allow those same folks to stockpile and hoard even more of their money. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick is also up for re-election this fall, as you know, and he's been piping up too. Max Shaw at Fox 7 TV in Austin says Patrick, who's been moonlighting as chair of Donald Trump's Federal Religious Liberty Commission, or RLC, has openly asserted that the U.S. Constitution does not mandate the separation of church and state, holding that what he calls the secular left has used that phrase to suppress the freedom and rights of religious Americans. Patrick says the RLC is set to deliver recommendations to Donald Trump in May on what moves Trump should make to safeguard religious freedoms in America. This commission also features the likes of Dr. Phil McGraw, who remains embroiled in a major financial scandal, and Paula White Cain, as we were mentioning yesterday, Trump's personal pastor and notorious crazy lady. The ACLU of Texas has issues with Patrick's claims. They call the separation of church and state a bedrock constitutional right rooted in the First Amendment's establishment and free exercise clauses, which traditionally prevent the government from establishing a national religion or interfering with personal religious practices. The RLC is also facing a lawsuit from a broad coalition of interfaith leaders pointing out its obvious and overt Christian bias, noting that the board of 16 consists of 15 Christians and only one Jewish member, with no other religion represented at all. This seems a good time to remind you that back here in Texas, Lieutenant Governor Patrick has also formed a new Senate Select Committee on Religious Liberty, stacked also with avid Christian nationalist types and likely pushing for a lot of the same stuff here at home. We're working on an update from the lone Democrat on that committee, Senator Cesar Blanco of El Paso. Progress Texas has endorsed Democrat and Austin State Rep Vicki Goodwin in her race to replace Dan Patrick at Lieutenant Governor. We're seeing in today's pod why the ongoing election cycle is of such dire importance. And while we're knee-deep in Bibles, we may as well throw in one more here. And a second story today from Stephanie Coython, working hard at the San Antonio Current, on the upcoming Turning Point USA organized Women's Leadership Summit, which is set to take place at the Marriott River Center in June, headlined by Erica Kirk, and featuring a fairly boilerplate lineup of female conservative influencers. This event aims to align with the MAHA movement by blending far-right politics with holistic wellness and homeschooling, but critics, including Trinity University professor Sarah E. Erickson, point to the summit as a prime example of what's known as commodity feminism. That's the strategic appropriation of feminist language like empowerment and self-care in a play to sell a product that actually reinforces traditional patriarchic structures, not the advancement of the freedom or opportunity of American women. And also what's known as pink razor feminism, which refers to femvertising, advertising that uses pro-female messaging to sell products that are often functionally identical to men's products, but are rebranded, often in pink, and often sold at a higher price. Dr. Erickson says that under the veneer of female confidence and leadership, in reality, this event markets a commoditized version of feminism centered on capitalism and very much limited to white women. While the summit uses femvertising to promote individual leadership, it's actually upholding the very systems that feminism traditionally seeks to overcome. Erica Kirk has not been shy about her public rejection of feminism in favor of biblical submission, which Dr. Erickson notes grants an additional layer of irony to both this event and Kirk's own use of feminist paved opportunities to have ended up herself a wealthy public-facing CEO. I'm learning all kinds of new terminology this morning. This Turning Point event in San Antonio is based around the marital concept of complementarianism, which echoes Erica Kirk's own public stance on so-called Ephesians 5 marriages, in which leadership for women is found in supporting and submitting to a husband's authority rather than seeking secular independence, pushing a so-called tradwife aesthetic, in which a woman's primary sphere of influence is the home, the family, and the church, while framing these self-limitations as a somehow countercultural and courageous choice. And of course, there's room here to hate on trans people. One particular speaker at this event will go on about her rigid binary views on gender, considering the very existence of transgender women as a wanton assault on biological womanhood. I don't figure we're going to have many takers in our audience, but ladies, if you're looking to trade in the hard-won legal and economic autonomy for American women that's been steadily built over the last 100 years or so in this country for a theocratic Handmaid's Tale scenario of domestic submission and dependency on men, this event in San Antonio in June would appear to be the one you've been waiting for. There are not one but two Texas elections approaching, local city-level elections on May 2nd and the statewide primary runoffs on May 26th. The early voting in the local election starts on April 20th. And for the midterm runoffs, your registration deadline is April 27th. Early voting in the runoff begins May 18th. More on voting in Texas at our carefully crafted voting information website, govotetexas.org, and there's a nice online tool from the Texas Tribune that shows you exactly who will be on your runoff ballot based on your address and your party. See that link in the show notes. Houston listeners, the next episode of our In Progress Roundtable show comes to you on the radio in the middle of a new Thursday afternoon block of progressive political programming tomorrow. In Progress starts at 6:30 p.m. every Thursday evening on KPFT 90.1 FM after the Progressive Forum and before the midterm show with Ernest Wittring. And it runs a second time every Sunday morning at 11 on KPFT FM HD2. With your support, we hope to expand our radio footprint beyond Houston to the top 5 Texas media markets this year. Click the link in the show notes to make your tax-deductible donation to help us reach new audiences via Texas Radio. Here at Progress Texas, we're getting ready for our 16th anniversary celebration in Dallas with drinks, light bites, and a fun review of the highlights of our successes over the last few years. Save the date. It's Tuesday, June 16th, and see the link in our show notes to reserve your spot. That's the Progress Texas Daily Dispatch for this Wednesday, April 15th, 2026. Links to all these original stories can be found in our show notes. When lies in Texas are well funded by the far right, your support for fact-based reporting is needed and appreciated. I'm Chris Mosier. Thanks so much for listening. Have a terrific day. We'll see you again tomorrow morning.